You are listening to the sounds of the Right On Network.
Hello and welcome back. This is episode 11 of 30 Minutes to Get Back, a podcast where we cover Peter Jackson's docuseries Get Back 30 minutes at a time. My name is Chris, and as always, I'm joined by AJ. AJ, how are you tonight?
I'm doing quite well. I've had a great week. I've watched Masters of the Universe. I'm having fun watching this finals. And I'm interested in talking about some Beatles Get Back with you and the listeners, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And as a New Yorker, I'm in a pretty good mood. We got a historic win. The vibes in New York are kind of like the 90s. Everybody's walking around like they have a soundtrack playing. So, and I keep thinking of that song because I keep seeing it all over the place. Back in the New York Groove, that Ace Frehley tune, I think. And that kind of fits today because I think the Beatles are back kind of in a Beatles groove in this episode. For these 30 minutes that we cover, it just seems even like George Martin kind of notices and says something to the band that they just seem like they're right there right now. And I'm curious if you also got that feeling from this.
Yeah, I got that feeling like, okay, we know what we're doing, and they seem like they're less in panic mode. So, yeah, back in the New York groove. And remember the Wu-Tang Clan, they performed at halftime, and that changed everything.
They're not getting enough credit. They're not getting enough credit for that comeback.
Yeah, Staten Island, they stood up.
So let's see. When we left off, we were kind of gushing about Billy Preston. And I think the last thing we saw was that they had decided to release Get Back as a single. And that was the end of day 14, January 23rd. So now when we start, we're in January 24th. It's day 15. And they're getting ready to record again. They don't have Billy because he's doing, I think it's a TV show that he's going to be on, or he's got an event that he came to London for. He didn't come to play with the Beatles. So he's taking care of whatever responsibilities he had. And they're getting ready to do something. They're trying to figure out, I think, what songs they can do where they don't need a keyboard. And, they discussed the idea of doing a companion book for the project. And we start seeing a lot of really great photos from the Get Back sessions. And we kind of want that book. So I don't know how much they're planning to build this out. Where, right, now they're adding a book to a live show, to an album, to a film. And they're supposed to do the show on Tuesday. And I believe that it is Friday for their timeline.
I think I have that book because I have a transcript of this documentary and there are a lot of pictures in there. So I wonder if those pictures went to this.
That could be. I mean, somebody was snapping photos left and right in there because there's a lot out there.
And Billy Preston, he isn't here because Billy Preston famously appeared as a musical guest on the BBC variety program Happening for Lulu during its first season in early 1969. He performed as a featured singer and keyboardist across 2 episodes in January, delivering standout musical performances, including his track, All That I've Got.
Wow. All right. That's great. And what's funny is that they're talking about him while he's not there. And it sounds like they're trying to figure out how to get him paid.
Yeah.
And they want him to do a couple of albums on the label. And he does. He ends up doing like two solo albums on the Apple label. I think George had said he'd produce them, but I don't know if that happened. I didn't look it up. But they call John calls him the fifth Beatle, and they it just seemed like they really like this guy and they really love how he sounds with them. And they almost sound like they were, as a band, were kind of trying to protect him. Like they wanted to make sure that they weren't taking advantage of him. I don't know if you picked any of that up or if you had any thoughts on how they feel about Billy.
Yeah, you could tell. Well, one, they're respecting his time. And this was interesting about this. Yeah, he did pop up and he showed up on some sessions. And, when he returns, Paul McCartney was like, hey, we don't want to just assume that you're just going to show up. You're okay with doing this, right? Because remember, he's popping up with other musicians in London, working with them. Now, I did see, and I'd never seen this footage before. It was Ray Charles. He was playing on the piano, and it was a TV show. And it was just Billy Preston dancing. So I was like, whoa, what's this? And then, we see the things where, like in the 70s, Billy Preston, he has a huge afro. It's like a wig or whatever, and it's kind of silly. And that's kind of interesting because in these sessions, he just seemed like a quiet school child that's behaving. But I think it's more of, okay, I'm in these people's space. So I'm just getting in where I fit in. I'm seeing what works, what doesn't work. And my actions, they speak really loud. So I don't have to demand to be heard because once I start playing, it's like, yeah, I made it where this tight-knit group, they're starting to feel like, I don't know if we can go forward without this guy. And I just showed up. So he has self-confidence in his power of, I don't have to be demanding and I don't have to demand to be heard because I'll let my actions do it. So that was pretty interesting. And, like I mentioned before, once this band splits up, Billy Preston, he does early work on the All Things Must Pass, George Harrison's first solo album. So yeah, he doesn't go too far.
Yeah, and George definitely has, I mean, they all do, but you always feel like George really has an affinity for American musicians. So, because he uses a lot of them and he appreciates a lot of them. So it's interesting that that's the album that Billy Preston ends up working on.
Yeah. And then the two of them, they become friends. Like I mentioned before, there's this picture where the two of them are in Gerald Ford's office, the president. So.
Right. So now some of the songs that they're trying to do, because they're trying to work out what they can put down, I guess, on tape without Billy in the session. And John starts playing a song, right, that he called On the Road to Marrakesh. And one of my favorite things about Get Back and watching it is seeing all of these songs that don't become Beatles songs, but that we hear. And this is one of them because it started out earlier in the film as a Child of Nature. And this song eventually becomes Jealous Guy. I think he scraps the whole idea of it being about India and he just keeps the melody. And it gets released on the Imagine album. So it's a lot of fun, I think, to hear this solo material, but in the setting of the Beatles playing on it. And in these 30 minutes, the India trip is kind of a big part of what they talk about. And it almost feels like watching them, this is the first time they're actually discussing the trip since the trip in like an honest way, because I get the feeling that they went to India and they came back as if they were kind of enlightened by this trip, but they were all sort of play acting and they really weren't. And because I think one of them even called it like it felt like going to school. It just seemed like they couldn't be themselves when they were in India because they felt like they had to pretend that they were something else. And I know that they're, Sexy Sadie, I know, is written about the Maharasi, right? And a lot of stuff from
Hey Bungalow Bill,
the White Album. Yeah, Hey Bungalow Bill. A lot of stuff from the White Album is directly from there, but we are hearing a lot of songs in this session that are from that time as well. Like Teddy Boy, I guess, Paul started writing that there, and they even play, I think it's, I'm going to probably pronounce it wrong, Dehra Dun, which is that George Harrison song that plays. And that was one of those songs that I think didn't get released until very late. But that wasn't a Beatles song. That was, it turned into, I guess, a George Harrison song Peter Jackson used on the soundtrack. So I'm wondering what you got out of that whole conversation that they were having as they were talking about their experience in India, and they were kind of trying to figure out where the others were coming from on that trip.
So I loved all of this. It seemed like it came off like Paul McCartney went to a showing and he saw the footage. So he's
Mm-hmm.
relaying back what he saw. And I know on Disney Plus, they have some type of Beatles in India video or something on there. And I haven't seen it yet, but I wonder if some of this footage is on there. So it's really fantastic what you're seeing. And Paul McCartney, he's talking about the whole thing of, yeah, it seems like we're kind of acting and we're behaving and we're not being ourselves. And he's describing what's going on. And George Harrison is kind of, it's like George Harrison is kind of listening to him mysteriously or suspiciously. And it's almost like Paul McCartney is kind of like taking the piss out of the whole thing. And then at the very end, because I remember this the first time I watched it, I might be reading too into it. And then George Harrison just says like, hey, you were supposed to go there to find out like who you are. So it wasn't you weren't supposed to be yourself. You're supposed to find yourself. So you got the totally wrong meaning out of this whole thing. And like, that's where these two, like they differ. And I know like when they went on that trip, they joked about it that Ringo's stomach was a little too English for the Indian food. So he left early. And you had other people on that trip because one of the Beach Boys was there, right? And Jane Asher and other folks. I'm trying to remember the one song on, Hey Prudence, where
Right. Dear Prudence,
where they weren't having a good time on a trip and they were trying to elicit her to come out and join the group. But yeah, there are this again, like this whole part, it just reminds me of how close they are to the White Album project. And if they were a touring band, this would be at the point where they were finishing the tour, promoting the White Album, or maybe still on it. But the White Album is fresh on their minds because it's there to be in reference. And I totally forgot about that the first time I watched this documentary.
Yeah, and a lot of the songs on the White Album do reflect some of their thoughts about it. You almost feel like each of them are a different level. Like Ringo did not enjoy his time there. It seems like Paul has maybe enjoyed it a little bit more. John might be in the middle, and then George, it seemed, got a lot out of it. But it definitely seems like it's a crossroads for them, that India trip, because that's where their personalities maybe start to diverge more than we knew. Because usually whenever I see a documentary that talks about their time in India, it's like and they went to India and Cynthia couldn't make the train and then John and her got divorced. That's normally what I see. Like, I don't get this sort of conversation that we're hearing them have about their time there and seeing how they each had kind of a different impression. Paul seemed to, I guess, think it was phony, or everybody was being phony, and Ringo couldn't handle the food, and John, I know Sexy Sadie was kind of inspired by the fact that the Maharishi was kind of hitting on all the women.
Yeah.
And he felt disillusioned by that, he's like, we're here to be, one with the universe and find this person who is enlightened, and he's just a guy hitting on young girls.
Yeah, the comment was they went to confront him, and he goes like, hey, what are you guys doing here? And John Lennon said, hey, you're so cosmic, you tell us.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on with this trip that I guess affects them when they come back, because if George felt like he got something and John got disillusioned and Paul thought it was a waste of time and Ringo got the trots, I'm guessing that it's just one of those moments in their lives that who knows, if, like you said, if they were a touring group and they didn't make this trip, how would things be different with how the band ends? I don't know.
Now, when you mentioned John Lennon performing earlier versions of Jealous Guy, what's interesting about that is, they also performed Teddy Boy. When they're rehearsing that, it seemed like that was broached with the group and they've worked on it before. And with Jealous Guy, it seemed like John Lennon was being vulnerable, like, hey, I'm just going to kind of play this and sing this just to see, will you guys gravitate towards me and go like, hey, what's that? Because he kind of played it and dropped it.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't really go anywhere. And even Teddy Boy, while they're working on it, it doesn't seem like they're feeling that song either, because I feel like towards the back half of that song, John starts, you know, talking about it like it's a square dance. And it almost feels like yeah, it's almost like he's being dismissive of it. Like, all right, this song's not working for us.
Take your partner and do-si-do, hold her tight and don't let go. When you got her, jump up. That is also on that anthology. Like that take. So I've heard that for years. So my mind is also blown with how much of this was available before it was available.
Yeah.
But yeah, Teddy Boy ends up on McCartney 1.
Now, probably, really, the biggest moment is the work that they do on Two of Us, because they kind of rework the song. They remove the bass and they kind of make it a little more acoustic, and you start to hear them turning it into the version that I think we know as listeners, because they're taking a lot of maybe the harshness out of it, and they're making it a softer song, a little more kind of like country folk, type of song. And it was interesting to see them have that discussion and have it click, where they were like, oh, well, somebody's going to have to play bass, and I can't sing and play bass because, I guess John isn't good at that. And then they come up with the idea. I think they mention I'll Follow the Sun as a song that they wrote without bass.
That is correct.
And I feel like that's where the switch flips, and they realize we should turn this into a different type of song. And this is the one, where if Get Back was put in the can yesterday, today is Two of Us. And just watching them go through all of that was really interesting to me. I don't know if anything popped out for you as they were doing Two of Us.
Most definitely. So Paul McCartney, he's credited a lot for being a hell of a melodic bass player, which I believe is rightfully so. I don't think I was grasping the fact that George Harrison is playing the bass parts on his guitar on this. And I love that on this when the album version. So I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. So I think we need to talk about that more, is where, Paul McCartney, he said, hey, I'm always rehearsing this on the guitar. I think I'd be more comfortable playing guitar on this. So George Harrison's like, okay. And he did pick up a bass. He was like, I guess I'll just play it on my guitar. And like, when you're hearing it, it sounds great. And
it sounds great, yeah.
I never realized this. Okay, so I think even like when I was in high school and I was learning about the Beatles, and then like I told you before, I was introduced by Magical Mystery Tour. So I think I understood the mythology of, hey, the Beatles, they started one way and then they totally went a different direction. And I think I was under the impression that it's like, okay, once we did Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, like, don't ask me to do I Want to Hold Your Hand anymore. Don't ask me this anymore. But at the same time, like, they're referencing like, hey, remember we did that one song without bass, I'll Follow the Sun. That's on Beatles for Sale. And then John Lennon, he's just kind of randomly playing I Feel Fine, just to himself. So I was like, oh, they're not going like, oh, I'm too cool for that early stuff. That's still near and dear to them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like some of those songs they were thinking of putting into this live event, because
that's correct. Yeah.
They were definitely playing a lot of stuff that was from earlier albums. And yeah, that is interesting, because you do feel like they evolved so much that they don't want to go backwards, and it's not really going backwards for them. I guess for them it's not, it's not linear. Maybe that's what they get out of India. The time's folded on top of itself. They don't really think about it like, oh, if we do this, because they do a lot of songs that they wrote before 1960.
That is correct.
That they're playing at this thing. So they're reaching into their bag.
It's very interesting how they're being nostalgic. That's very interesting, because, of course, they're playing the 1950 stuff when they're looking for a crutch or they're warming up. And like we keep talking about this, like They're reverting back to things they liked in their childhood. And then as they're reaching back, they're like, oh yeah, remember 64, 63, we were doing I Feel Fine. Why wouldn't I stop at that and think to play that? They're reaching 30, so they're also like looking back and going like, hey, you know what? We are some lucky son of a guns. If we did play live, why wouldn't we play I Feel Fine? It was a #1 hit. People would expect that. Let's go for it.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't think so, but I guess I'll mention it because it came into my head. I'll ask you. Do you think that they had any inkling that we should dig into all these older songs because they were towards the end, or do you think they didn't think that way?
That is a good point. I like the fact that you were saying that India trip had them thinking about time not being linear and it's folding on itself. I think that's an interesting concept. It's hard not to think it's somewhere in their subconscious that they're breaking up. Or at least they're going to do an aforementioned Wu-Tang Clan where we do solo projects and then we come back together and do a group effort and then we do solo projects. But something like that is coming up because speaking of the trip to India, they show footage of them and John Lennon, he takes that that helicopter ride. And when he's up there in the air, he talked about that's when he started thinking about the song, Yes, I'm Lonely and Want to Die, the Your Blues.
Mm-hmm.
And then he performs that with that group. Remember with Eric Clapton and...
Right, on the Rolling Stones film, right?
Yes. Yeah. And now your entertainment for this evening, the Rolling Stones. I don't know if we mentioned that in the last episode, but guys, John Lennon is fixated on doing this. Every once in a while, he is saying to the camera, and now your entertainment for this evening, the Rolling Stones.
Which I guess is what was it called? The Rock and Roll Circus or something like that was the name of that film. Yeah. And yeah, there was like a line he had to say in the film.
So think about this. John Lennon, he did that without the Beatles. Before this recording session in January 1969, George Harrison was in California doing his own thing. So Ringo is doing he's getting ready to do the Magic Christian. I just wanted an excuse to say that. So they're already in that mindset. Even if we continue to be a band, we're going to do this individual stuff. So yeah, there's something going on where, I don't know. Or at least, hey, this is the end of this chapter. We're wrapping it up. And then maybe in the 70s, we're only going to do like acoustic singer-songwriter stuff, or we're just going to be a blues band going forward. But maybe this is the end of this chapter. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, because like you said, I mean, with India and the way they talk about it, seems Paul was dissatisfied with the way that they went about making the White Album. And then with everything going on when George left, in the beginning of these recording sessions, it felt like it was disintegrating. So I don't know if this may be our last chance to do it, or hey, let's do these songs because it's going to remind us why we're a band in the first place. Or maybe they're just, I remember how to play this song and we can slip it into the playlist and we're just looking too deep.
Yeah. Yeah, because we need to fill time. We know these songs. Let's play this. Let's play the hits. It'll get us through the 45 minutes and we're good.
Mm-hmm. Now, we do slip now out of that 15th day. We go to day 16, which is January 25th, which is the Saturday they talked about working, because Tuesday is supposed to be the live show. And it sounds like they're realizing that this isn't going to happen on Tuesday. It sounds, they do a few more songs, right? They play, a few more songs from the 50s, a couple more, they do like Maggie May, and they do
I Fancy My Chances with You.
Fancy My Chances with You. And they even do Her Majesty, which is a lot of fun because that has a fun story to it, right? That's the one where they wrote it and it was supposed to slip into Abbey Road around where Mean Mr. Mustard is.
Yes.
And Paul didn't like it, so he told the tape op to throw it away. But I guess EMI had a rule where you can't throw anything away, so he stuffed it at the end, like after like 20 seconds of silence at the end, and no one knew it was there. And then when they listened to it, they liked it, so they kept it.
And you hear his giggle.
Yeah, yeah. And even you hear in the beginning, if you listen to the album, they don't cut out the notes from Mean Mr. Mustard. So when you get that loud bass, that's actually from Mean Mr. Mustard, where it was going right into that, like the medley, the first half of that little medley piece. So that's why it has that kind of loud crash at the beginning of the song after such a long, after the end, and then you get the silence, and then it crashes into Her Majesty.
And they perform Polythene Pam.
They perform Polythene Pam, yeah.
She's so good looking, but she looks like a man.
Yeah, and I don't think that was the first time they did it, but I feel like it had a different name, but I can't remember now earlier on. But yeah, it.
I think it was about like an early fan that went to the early shows or something.
Oh, that's interesting. See, for me, I didn't know what any of these were about, and I just always felt like they were like almost like. You've said it in the past. It's almost like they're writing rock and roll nursery rhymes. Right? They got these names of characters, right?
Another generation, they're going to learn how to play music, and they're going to pull up the sheet book, and it's going to be my songs, and they're going to learn how to play it. So it seems like it has that vibe. Like Paul McCartney, he talks about this all the time. They're like...
watching them play these songs and writing them, we discussed it in an earlier episode where I think Paul kind of looks for words that sound right in the song more than he's looking for, I wrote these lyrics and they mean something really deep to me. And you get songs like, Rocky Raccoon, where it doesn't seem to make any sense. He's telling a story, or even Get Back. The way that they had to come up, they were trying to figure out a name, right, with Sweet Loretta that sang well. It wasn't like I have this, poem that I wrote and I want to put it to music. So that's what you feel like when you hear a lot of their songs. And not that they're bad songs or that lyrically they're nonsense, but they just it's a different cat. Their lyrics are just very I don't know, abstract, and you almost like it's almost like a Rorschach painting, right? Right, where you put your own impression on what you're hearing rather than them telling you what the song is about. I mean, his songs always seem to have reach backwards. I think we might have talked about this before because like Penny Lane has, Heart and Soul, the song Heart and Soul in it. And like some of his songs sound almost vaudeville sometimes. It's interesting because I always feel like, Paul is kind of reaches back for his inspiration. John Lennon's inspiration seems to be the present. And, all of his songs seem to be about what he's doing at the moment. And George's is more kind of stretching outward to the cosmos. And it's an interesting way to hear the three of them when they're songwriters and how they coalesce those three parts of what they do.
It's funny that you said vaudeville because the first time I ever saw Paul McCartney in my life is the song Say, Say, Say with him and Michael Jackson and Linda McCartney.
Yeah.
In a video doing vaudeville where they were running cons town to town. So it's funny that you said that.
I mean, you listen to some of his solo stuff like on Band on the Run, like when he does the name of it's escaping me, but it's like Uncle something.
Uncle Albert.
Yeah. And you listen to like some of the breaks in that song and you're like, this sounds like, old-timey music. Well, how can the folks reach us?
Go to 30getback@gmail.com and we'll have more links in the show notes of how you can reach us. We're on the On the Record Jams feed on your podcatcher. And I had some technical difficulties on my end of the recording, so I had to stitch some stuff together. So if anything sounded a little wonky, that was on my end. And hey, I hope everyone's having fun watching the FIFA World Cup games, and congratulations to the Knicks. Stay safe out there. I hope you guys have a great summer and take care of yourselves. Listen, I'll hear you guys again, or you can hear us again on episode 12 of 30 Minutes to Get Back, where we're talking about the Peter Jackson documentary of the Beatles' Get Back sessions, 30 minutes at a time.